chainmails give wins which give gold as well. No, I know. Don't get me wrong. I'm not. I wouldn't recommend doing this necessarily, but it is funny. I think this is bad, but it is funny, and it's kind of like a little bit better to the point of maybe not being as bad. It's mostly okay. Fortune in battle. 50 goes from 2550 to 75, so by our evaluation, tier 2 is the same, so it's fair. The really interesting thing about Fortune Battle is now that you have the chance of seeing it at tier 1, maybe you'll see it in opening packs a bit more. Because like this is something that, like check the bodies, you really want as early as possible. The thing is, like, so I wonder how this math works out at the end of the day. I would guess the odds of finding Forge the Battle in the first 3 rounds of the game are now lower than they used to be. Because while you can find it at tier 1, it has to compete against all of the other alliances at once. I'm actually not sure on that math. It's interesting. It feels like, so when you actually look at all of the alliances, there's a lot. Or like I guess it's kind of the same way, but I can go to like the globals. So we've got like Siphon, Strange, Bedfellows, Reactor, you know, all the like Age of Chivalry, completing coordinated assaults, literally like all of this shit you can get offered. Not all 1/3. What do you mean 1/3? They're all decided and shuffled across 3 tiers. Guys, it's still the same odds. 1/3 of the alliances get tier 1, 1/3 gets tier 2, and 1/3 gets tier 3. Right, but you're still competing over the same odds. What are you guys talking about? Like, you still have to compete against all of the other ones. You can only get 1 alliance item of each type now. I think you're still going to make them stackable. Like, they compete for the tier placement and then they compete for the drop slot, but it's the same thing. Like, the odds are going to be the same. So, I do think that, I mean, my guess, and I'm not sure exactly on the drop rates, but I would be a little surprised if this didn't make it less common to find Fortune in Battle in the pre-human rounds, which I think is almost like a nerf to this idea, which is a little awkward. I like Fortune in Battle. I really like the idea of Brawny. I think it leads to both interesting strategies and unique board states, while still being like very counterable at the end. The fact that Enigma is worse and not super auto-include is a buff to the concept of Brawny in general. I think this is okay. I think ultimately this change probably doesn't change much. If anything, I suspect it makes it a little bit weaker, but we'll see. The fact that I think the meta is going to shift in a way that might make it stronger though. So it might end up being more worthwhile. So Bedfellows goes from 30 to 30, 40, 50. It's just interesting. I guess the drop rate of this is also going to be lower, right? It feels like, I don't know if I necessarily like exactly this new drop system. It's a little weird. Because before, I mean, the odds of getting double Bedfellows aren't that low. You pick Bedfellows round 1, what are your odds of getting a second Bedfellows by 3? Probably around 30 or 40%. So your total odds of like starting a game with double Bedfellows is pretty good. Now suddenly you have to ask pull the first one out of all 30 alliances, and then you have to ask pull the second one. That seems really hard. Yeah, I'm not sure. I guess it's gonna be really, really hard to actually find what you're looking for. This makes the game so much more random. I hate it. I do like the direction it's going in. I like that they're treating alliances kind of more fairly, but the fact that something needs to tweak about how exactly it works. Like, I think that this isn't really the direction they. In some ways, this direction is better, and in other ways, it's worse. I do like that they're changing it. I just think it needs a bit of a tweak before it can really be a lot better. Okay, so next up we've got Retaliate. Damage changed from 80 to 30, 45, 60. Gutted. Absolutely gutted. Holy shit. Retaliate, PP hands. No. I mean, okay. I have a weird relationship with this item because, like, on one hand, I've been complaining that this should get nerfed for like the last month and a half, and on the other, I'm kind of sad that this got nerfed. Like, I had a particular fondness of Retaliate. This item was so good. It was so nuts. You can get it early. I mean, it's true. I don't think this really wants to be gotten early. I don't think Retaliate is good in the early game at all. The scale's better in the late game, guys. This is like a mid-late game item, which is when you got it before. I think this item is just unadulterated garbage now, right? I mean, they literally halved its damage. You don't need, like, the Tidehunter ulti mana charge anymore. Is there any reason to ever pick this? Slark got better, but you don't do this with Slark. This is mostly for, like... You can get this with Slardar early. So the reason you would pick it is if the other options are just shit. But basically, they straight up took this and they just made it a lot less good, right? Because Retaliate really wanted to come online at like round 15-20, which is when you offered it early. It's pretty good early, fights are slow as hell. Right, but that's not how Retaliate works. Retaliate doesn't work well in a slow fight. It doesn't stack the debuff, guys. Like, your unit has a limited amount of health, and that amount of health is going to dictate how much damage Retaliate can deal. In the mid game, when you have a 200, like a level 2 unit, because the way Retaliate works is you need a level 2 unit with some kind of EHP item, which is like Chainmail or Vanguard, and it applies to the entire enemy team for 3 seconds. That's how Retaliate works. It sucks early. It's something you want at round 20, when you can get a level 2 Slardar and like a Chainmail at least, maybe a Vanguard, right? That's when you want it. And when there's like 8 enemy units attacking it, because it scales with unit count too. If you get this on like round 3 or 4, fights last longer, but it doesn't matter for Retaliate. You don't want a long fight for Retaliate. It doesn't make any sense. Because it doesn't restack. It's not like Tooth and Claw where every time they attack they take that damage. So yeah, this is just kind of like ass now. I mean, it was kind of busted before, and they did nerf it by about half, which makes it... I mean, they nerfing it by half is huge. It went from 80 to like... It's kind of hard to say exactly, effectively what it went to here, but like something like 50. It's a huge nerf. I think the item was very good before, but still kind of required a narrow situation. And the fact that you don't really need to charge mana for Tidehunter does kind of make it a little bit less useful. Are you staying in Seattle permanently? Yeah, I live here now. The bigger nerf to Retaliate is that you never want to run Tide or Decent now? Right. Exactly. I'm not sure you never want to run Tide, but it does kind of feel like Tide is kind of bad. So, yeah. I mean, it's just a little bit weaker. Imagine Tide plus Sardar plus Retaliate, they had to nerf it. What? Guys, Retaliate was literally stronger before. I mean, like I said, it needed to be nerfed. This card was absolutely busted. They nerfed this by like half of its value, which is really, really, really a big nerf. And Naga's, or rather scaled units, already had gotten nerfed from this patch. So, I mean, I do think this is easily an over nerf. But I do think it's probably a good thing that this got nerfed, I guess. I don't know, it's a little weird. I think people kind of forgot, because of the way the meta ended up being, people kind of forgot for a while how busted this was. It was, like, before the legendary meta especially, it was just straight up dominating and completely deciding certain fights, which is kind of nuts, right? But yeah, I mean, it's good that they nerfed it, because it literally was unfairly good. Age of Chivalry. Damage reduction for both physical and magic damage changed from -10 to 7, 10, 25 per adjacent knight. Did I say 25? I meant 12.5. That's weird. So it's not 7.5? They made it 12.5, but not 7.5, huh? Too lazy to add in that extra 0.5, huh? Couldn't be bothered. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. It's basically on par. Knights are kind of good at all stages in the game, so I guess this is technically a little bit better, but ultimately this is fairly unchanged. It's just like they kept it the same as well as they could have. Completing the cycle. Oh, here we go. Completing the cycle. Heal percentage changed from 5 to 357, and range up 2 cells. 2 cells. We talked about this with Ravage range. The difference between 1 cell and 2 cells is 8 versus 24. So it literally triples the range on it. The range being the amount of cells it covers. It goes from the 8 adjacent units to the 24 units surrounding within 2 cells. That's kind of insane. That's really huge. That's it. Like, and additionally, Lone Druid's Spirit Bear now has the Druid tag, which means it will trigger completing the cycle when it dies, which I think doesn't matter that much. You guys are all pointing that out. At the end of the day, though, the bear is very, very often the last one to die in a fight, so that's kind of important. Furion summons trees closer to him. That's a pretty small factor as well. I mean, nothing really matters except for the fact that this is 2 cells now, right? 2 cells is pretty huge. I do think that, yeah, I mean, honestly, this is kind of silly. I'm so glad Valve buffed Druids. I've spent the entire, last 2.5 weeks just being like, man, where are all the Druids? I wish I could see more Druids in my games. Let's get these units buffed. I don't know, dude. I don't understand. Furion gets buffed. Dream Protector is I guess it's a nerf, but I mean, it's kind of staying the same. Lone Druid gets buffed. Completing the cycle gets a big buff. I don't know, dude. I mean, alright. Oh, okay. Cool. Jesus, dude. I don't know, man. I guess we're gonna see a lot of Druids. You guys excited? You guys happy? Finally, Druids are playable. Okay, it's gonna be a good one, guys. We'll see. I do think early Druids are gonna be very strong. I don't really see too much of a way around that. There's obviously a lot of things that are kind of hard to predict with metas. I think that more so applies to late game than early game. For example, it's kind of hard for me to look at something like Troll Warlord and be like, okay, this is how you want to play late game strategies now, right? Because there's so many factors that could kind of get there, and I'm not sure on the timing of when things are going to be good, I don't know whether you're going to want to try to close games out at round 20 or round 40, because different patches will literally have that big of a range of when builds are trying to come online. I'm exaggerating a bit, but it's a really big range, right? I don't know what kind of strategies, late game things are going to be good, basically kind of predicated on the paths that lead there, and how good those paths are, how much pressure is applied to them, how contested they are, how reliable it is you can pick up supporting tools, certain items that are good for them. But when it comes to early game stuff, just early game smash, it's how, I mean, I don't see it even really being possible that Druids aren't going to be very good. I'm not saying they're going to be the most busted things ever, but I mean, they were already good. We're kind of a lot of us are a little bit sick of them, just a little bit. I don't think there's really that many variables here that we might not be considering that would make it so Druids aren't really good. I mean, certainly we don't know exactly how good they're going to be, but it seems quite undeniable that they will be between very good and ridiculously OP. I'm not saying, obviously, I'm not saying they will be ridiculously OP. I think it's possible, but I mean, they'll be at least very good, right? Okay, Tooth and Claw. Pretty standard change here. Goes from 7, 10, 13 from 10 at a tier 2. Obviously, this item kind of gets buffed by the fact that Venomancer exists in the form he does as a 1 cost. So suddenly, Tooth and Claw, whether you find it tier 1 or tier 2 in the first 3 rounds, pair with the Venomancer, you're good to go. It's a very, very strong opener. you're gonna get complainers. Yo, BH Shap, welcome to the 1/8 Gay Club, my man. Okay. So, why it says from 5%, now it's 30% for max health. I think it's per second, right? It's over the course of the duration, which was like 6 seconds or something. Yo, Brocklin21. What's up, man? Welcome to the 1/8 Gay Club. Okay, so we have Unstoppable. Invulnerability duration changed from 2 to 1, 2, 3. I'm not even going to give this time of day. Next. Wicked Intent. Heal prevention percentage changed from 25% to 10, 15, 25% per Heartless unit. So this is kind of on par. It's a tier 3 and it went down. I want to point something out. I've been talking about this on par thing. I think it's kind of important to understand timings. The thing about timings, right? So like we can look at coordinated assaults. Or sorry, let me use a better example. We can look at what's a good example? Age of Chivalry, right? And I was saying like, okay, it's a tier 2 at 10, and the tier 2 is still 10, and it's a bit weaker at tier 1. It's a bit stronger at tier 3, and I can look at that and I can say, okay, this stays basically the same because knights are kind of good at every point of the game, right? Now, I did something a little different when I looked at Retaliate. And a couple of you guys pointed that out. I said this got half. I said this got like cut in half in terms of value, right? It went from 80 to, I said something like 50. Some of you guys pointed out, well, but it's a tier 3, so shouldn't it be 60? Because 60 is a tier 3 here, so shouldn't that be what we were comparing it to? Shouldn't we say, you know, it got downgraded by like 25% instead of by like 50%? And the answer is no. Because it comes down to the timing into which certain things come online. Retaliate is strongest when you're on like rounds 15 to 30, basically, is when Retaliate is at its strongest. No, I'd say 15 to 40, actually. Basically, anytime. You know what? 20 to 40. I think 20 to 40 is probably the best answer. It's like, you don't even want it that early. You really want it typically like round 20 or later is when Retaliate's really good. You need a level 2 unit, and you need that unit to have some kind of tank item. At round 20, you've got like better odds of something like a Vanguard. So reasonably speaking, even though the tier 3 value is the same, the fact that it doesn't really benefit from these other two values because of the timing makes it feel, it ends up being weaker than just a straight 80 to 60 change, right? And the same is true for Wicked Intent. So we can look at Wicked Intent, we can be like, okay, this is tier 3. At tier 3, it's the same. And it's got a tier 1 or 2. But at the end of the day, I don't think you're going to want these that early. Because you really need like 4 Heartless, I think, for this to be really great. That being said, we are in an age of druids, so let's think. In the early mid-game, you can have pretty easily something like 2 Heartless. And let's say you get kind of a best case early game scenario, which is the tier 2 Wicked Intent with 2 Heartless pair. So your opponent's healing is reduced by 30. That's okay. I guess. It's not great. You wouldn't really want this, right? So yeah, like this is an item that kind of like gets sort of relatively nerfed by this. I think you're just not really gonna want this early. It's something that really scales deep into the mid game. Like this comes online the most on like rounds 20 to 30 or so, which is going to be where you are looking to like stop your opponent's like 4 warlock combination online. Hi bitch, what's up? What's up, man? A tier 1 Retaliate isn't competing with other good tier 3 items, opportunity cost 2. Yes, sure, exactly. But yeah, basically Wicked Intent, it just feels like there's not really too much of a reason to be picking this up early, I'm thinking. Ultimately, it's okay, but you need something like 4 Heartlesses for this to work. It was really good when you got 4 to 6, but 6 Heartless, you're never doing 6 Heartless anymore. Since they changed Fall from Grace from 15 to 20, you're never, ever going to want to do 6 Heartless anymore, I think. There's just no reason for it. So suddenly, Wicked Intent gets almost a bit of a nerf off of that. Usually Wicked Intent is something you pick after you're already in Fall from Grace, and the fact that Warlocks are nerfed means Wicked Intent, I think, is less good. Now you might say, well, but Warlocks are nerfed, but Druids are buffed, right? So both of them have heals, both of them are very powerful. Shouldn't Wicked Intent maybe stay the same? And the answer, I think, is no, because Wicked Intent Druids are like the early game heals, and warlocks are like the mid or late game heals, right? And the timing on like when Wicked Intent is supposed to give you the most value, like scaling per unit per heal, just really does so much better with Warlock's heals than Druid's heals, I think. So I do think this item, just by like meta shift, by these numbers, by the timing of everything, I think it gets a pretty solid nerf. And by like Warlock nerf as well, because if Warlocks are worse, Wicked Intent's probably worse. I'm not sure how common Warlock is as a build right now. It was extremely common before. I think 2 Warlocks is still going to be like a pretty powerful mid-game thing. We'll see. I think this is still like an item you will be forced into sometimes. Dragon's Hoard. Damage percentage per gold changed from 1 to, you know, here's the 0.5, here's the 1, and here's the 1.5. So we can see, again, if we're applying the same logic, it's like, okay, the tier 3 makes it from 1 to 1.5. So you can say, looking at that, it got like reasonably buffed, I guess. If you get it at the same timing, it's 1.5 instead of 1. It's a pretty big deal. I mean, 50% better. It means like, you know, let's say you're on the silly like 100 golds. I say silly because it's usually silly. Sometimes it's good, but it's sort of a pipe dream. You're on the 100 gold dream. You're dealing, you know, 250% damage instead of 200% damage, which is sweet. I mean, that's a big upgrade for sure. You can get this fairly early. The one thing about Dragon's Hoard is that you don't really want to be getting it that early. Typically, you want it after you already have the first DK, because you can really only go dragons if you get a DK level 2, and it can be kind of hard to secure that unless you get like a fairly early DK 1. So it's a little bit risky to pick this up too early. If you're already a Knights, you're in round 3, like nobody has like any Bat Rider or anything, you see about going it. It's not necessarily the worst thing ever. You get some amount of like early game value from this. Sure, I mean, why not, I guess. Is this decent? So damage percentage per gold. Let's say you get the tier 1 version. So you have 0.5% damage per gold. So when you're at 50 gold, you're getting 25% damage in the mid game. When you're hitting your like max interest at like round 14 or so. So if you have just like a casual, let's say you have a super casual like level 2 puck. 53 DP. What the fucking puck. Never mind. Forget it. I ignore that. It's not worth it. Okay. Final flash. Remaining health percent trigger changed from 30 to 10, 20, 30. So, again, kind of as you'd expect. This is actually interesting. This is really interesting. Holy shit. Wait, isn't this broken? What the fuck? This is a huge buff. What? If you just like 10% is gonna happen. Like in early fights that are slow. Wait a second. This looks fair. At first glance, this looks fair. This is not fair at all, right? Remaining health percent triggered change. So all like the thing is, if you look at all of these same numbers look fair on most of these, but I mean, all you need is like 10 or 20%, especially in an early game where things are happening kind of slower. 10% is ass. So in like mid and late game, when 10% is like when things are kind of blowing up left or right, 10% is, I think, ass. 10% is going to get leapfrogged all the time. Maybe it'll get leapfrogged by more than I'm thinking, but what I'm thinking is in like even early game spots, I'm thinking like rounds like pre-15. If you get like a level 2 Razor, and that's easy to get. Razor's 1 cost now, right? You get a level 2 Razor with Final Flash at 10%. 10% of Razor's health, that's not going to get leapfrogged that often, like almost at all, in like the first 15 rounds, right? So I was looking at Razor in tier 1. So Razor is, hang on, let me actually look at like the new Razor value. Like 2-star Razor is forcible. That's like fairly easy. So you get a 2-star Razor, 1,000 health, 10% is 100. So in the last 100, it does the second burst. That can be pretty good. I don't know. I do agree with you guys that 10% is gonna get like leapfrogged a lot. It's not necessarily always gonna be going off at 10%, but at the same time, it's not as big of a swing as some of the others, right? Like I don't think it really scales very linear, right? Like for example, if you look at some of these, like you look at any of them, and they're all kind of like just trying to be linear, like 500 milliseconds, 1,000 milliseconds, 1,500 milliseconds, right? Or sorry, I don't know why I said milliseconds. This is percent damage. I was thinking of something else. But yeah, basically, it's just like, it's just 1, 2, 3. But this Final Flash, all this represents is probability of getting off. And while you do have a diminished probability of getting your load off at 10% compared to 30, I do not think it's 33% probability. I don't think it is at all. It's probably closer to like 50%. I don't know, man. This is not bad. I think this is pretty solid. But I could be overrating it a little bit. I mean, it can't possibly be less than 33%, right? 10% is near useless past round 10. It will get leapfrogged every time. I mean, isn't the floor of it... Like, am I logically breaking this down wrong? Because what I see this as is a representation of the floor of probability, right? Like, you say 10% will get leapfrogged every time. At 1,000 health? You think my unit's never going to get to 100 health? That doesn't sound right at all. Like, especially in the early mid-game where fights are slower, things are dealing, like, less damage. If I'm on, like, round 10, round 15, I don't think this is getting chunked for 100 in almost any fight. I mean, it'll happen sometimes. If they die by abilities, it'll get tough to get off? Yeah, I mean, it can be. I'm not saying it'll get off every time. It doesn't need to get off every time. Of course, it will be weaker than the 30%. I just don't think it's 3 times weaker. Like, if for any of these, if you look at Dragon's Hoard, this is 3 times weaker than this, right? When you look at, like, you know, completing the cycle, this is half as weak as this. 3 compared to 7 is, like, close enough to half. I mean, I obviously, this is weaker. I just don't think it's 3 times weaker. It can't be. It literally can't be 3 times weaker. Like, this is like a floor for success. And as a floor, it's pretty high. And I see this, because if Razor wasn't a 1 cost, I kind of wouldn't be, like, jerking off to Final Flash in the way that I am. Razor being 1 cost, like, Puck being better, like, early mages, I was saying before, when I was reading above, before I read this Final Flash change, I was saying, like, you typically don't want to still be going mages in the first, like, 10 rounds of the game. But suddenly, if I have Final Flash, like, 10%, my mages, you know, I get, like, 1 or 2 mages to 2 stars by, like, round 10. That feels like it actually will be winning me some fights. The cast point, yeah, the cast point does matter, for sure. Cast point to average time that unit lives with remaining health. I'll have to try this out. I could easily be wrong. I didn't play a lot of, like, Final Flash Mage before. You do have to, like, you know, get your full cast off. But at the very least, this is still something that scales into the late game decently. Like, it is true that at 10% you have, like, a diminished chance of getting it off. But, like, okay. Imagine, like, if you look at any of these that is even functional early game, they're usually trash late game, right? Like, completing the cycle is nuts, but I'm selling it at Druids, right? Age of Chivalry is kind of one of the few things that's kind of good at all points in the game. But, you know, we've got, you know, some stuff that you want to transition out of, or stuff that's just, like, kind of good early, like Tooth and Claw is just kind of good early. Dragon's Hoard is kind of bad early, but good late. Whereas, like, Final Flash, I think this is playable early. And, like, 10%, it's not... In a majority of fights, you're not going to get your second cast off at 10%, but, I mean, this is still valuable late in the game. It's not, again, even if it gets off less than, like, half of your fights, that still is a major impact for your board strength if you're carrying into, like, 6 mages or something. I'm not sure if 6 mages is going to be what you're going to want to go. Maybe it's just, like, you know, Razor plus Lich or something like that, but this is, like, something that even at a diminished chance of being able to get the final cast off, you can control it a bit with items. You have like Vip Booster Scotty, that can help a little bit if you want. You get a Lich Ash pull at like 25, 10% health on like a Lich with like a Vip Booster. It's not unreasonably low. You've got like a CM Aura. This is functional. This is very functional. It's like compared to other things which will either fall off or take too long to come online. So I don't know. I look at this and I see a lot of power in this. 10% feels like non-functional in the late game. I mean, I don't think it'll happen in a majority of fights, but even if it happens in like every other fight or like a third of fights, that's still something that can have a huge ability to swing fights if it's like a big AoE like Lich or Razor. We'll see though. Hunter's Focus. Damage bonus per hunter attacking the target changed from 10% to 5, 7, 10%. So Hunter's Focus is already like the worst perk in the game. I want to actually talk about this one. Hunter's Focus is unadulterated garbage. Let's talk about Hunter's Focus. So it's already really bad. I was saying before when I was talking about like different alliances, some of them are good if you only have a couple, right? Like the Knight Alliance item is actually kind of like deceptive. It looks like you want to run 6 Knights, but actually it's kind of better with 4 because it buffs your non-Knights, right? And with Coordinated Assault, you only really need 1 or 2 Trolls, even though at first glance it might look like you might want 4, right? But you look at Hunter's bonus, and it's the opposite. Hunter's Focus. 10% extra attack damage for each hunter attacking the same target. So this is shit. This is like unplayable. It's almost like flawed just by the merit of its own design. So if you have 3 hunters, they're all getting 20% damage if they're attacking the same target, which is kind of like an overwin condition because usually when they're attacking the same target, you're good. You're often going to be overkilling units. Like let's say you get 6 hunters and they're all at plus 50% damage when they're attacking the same target. Your targets are going to be dying while the arrows are flying in midair a lot, right? You're going to be overkilling the same unit. Kind of makes no sense. 6 hunters right now after this patch, as I said, is already trash. Hunter's Focus is literally like, you have to understand, if I have 3 hunters, if I have less than 6 hunters, I can't pick Hunter's Focus. Well, I mean, I can if I'm being offered trash, but like if I have 3 hunters, I'm gonna take a relic instead of Focus, and I'm gonna put this on my Medusa, right? Like I'm not gonna take Hunter's Focus. This item is bad. It can only be playable with 6 hunters. And 6 hunters are unplayable right now. Hunter's Focus is already bad in a universe where 6 hunters is playable. So, I mean, at the end of the day, this is absolute ass. There's this concept in card games of like absolute ass. If you remember Absolute Zero from like, chemistry or early physics classes, it's a very similar concept. It's like the point of ass. You can't get more ass than this. And Hunter's Focus has hit this point of absolute ass. There's no redeeming this. I think I don't know if I feel like it needs a rework personally. I think the design of this is just a little weird at the end of the day. Like, I don't think a numbers tweak, if they bump this to 15%, I don't think it's really good enough. It seems it's so committal. The way it works is just very inconsistent. Even when you're at 6 hunters, like, the amount of wasted DPS on arrows, just like over-focusing the same target is just weird. When all 6 of your hunters, like, okay, you've got a hunter's board, right? You've got your, 3x3 of like, you've got your 6 hunters together. They're all ranged except for Beastmaster, I guess now. So let's say all 5 hunters you have attack the same target. Like you start the board, all 5 hunters are attacking the same target. So they get their initial volley off. You're overkilling whatever you're attacking usually. Like, if you're all attacking the same target, you do not need that plus 50% extra attack damage. You're gonna have 150% damage arrows that are gonna be hitting corpses. Like, it kind of makes no sense. So I do think that's definitely on a list of things that might need to just change from a design perspective. I feel like it's kind of hard to fix this just with like a numbers tweak. Anyway, Soul Sucking Siphon. Spell lifesteal percentage changed from 25 to 25, 35, 50. 50? Is that decent? That's quite pickable. So again, I think like let's look above, and I really want to stress this enough, but it comes down to timing. Think about the game as a function of like different things coming online at different times, right? I was saying Retaliate looks like it's okay 80 to 60, but it's not, because Retaliate wants to come online at exactly the time where you were getting Retaliate before, which was in tier 3, right? Or like only in tier 3. Getting Retaliate early is just kind of like bad. Whereas you look at Soulsucking Siphon, this is the opposite. Soulsucking Siphon is an item that you don't want to be picking in the first 3 rounds of the game. Maybe now that Venomancer is a thing, maybe it's okay, but like pre-Venomancer change, Soulsucking Siphon is like this compromise where it's very powerful between rounds like 15 and 30, or 15 and 25, that's like when it's online. It's bad after that, it's bad before that. Because you don't get good Warlocks before that, because Warlocks cost like 4 and 5. You get like Shadow Fiend, Necrophos, Alchemist, even Disruptor. Disruptor you sometimes get early, but you don't really want to run him that early. Like, the core Warlocks for Siphon are like Shadow Fiend, Necrophos, Alchemist. So you need to get 2 out of 3 of those, and that usually happens on like 15 through 25. That's when Soulsucking Siphon is kind of at its strongest. And when you think about it this way, it's like, I don't really want to be picking this in the first 3 human rounds. I'd rather have a chainmail, right? And now suddenly I can pick this later and get like a better percentage for when it's on its way online, right? Like if I see this round 10 at 35, you know, and obviously you could say the opportunity cost is higher because it's a tier 2 pack, a round 10 pack instead of a round 3 pack. Honestly, it's not as much higher as it probably seems. It's not. Because usually a tier 1 pack is going to have some high opportunity cost, which is like a chainmail or like a gloves of haste, whereas a tier 2 pack on round 10, you're going to see some auto pick items will block you from this, like arcane boots, but there's also going to be a lot of items you can't take. There's going to be a lot of items that are just like blade mail is a worse item than chainmail, right? Even after the chainmail nerf, which we'll get to, spoiler alert, in a bit. Right? Something like Brooch of the Aggressor is a worse item than Brooch of the Martyr, right? The opportunity cost of a tier 2 pack is a bit higher than tier 1, but not as much as you would think. It's only a little bit higher. So yeah, I mean the fact that I can see Soulsucking Siphon at the points of the game, like I can see this on round 15 for 50%. That's like when it's online. I think this is not bad. I mean this is kind of popping. Like I could actually see myself scooping this up for really good value. We'll see. Warlocks are a bit weaker right now, but there's still something you often want to be pairing in mid-game, so I think it's fine. Indomitable Will. Debuff resistance changed from 50% to 25, 50, 75. What does this do? Indomitable Will, debuff resistance from... it's Indomitable Will, right? The card is just it doesn't really make sense. It's never really gonna be good, right? Okay, great. Elusive targets. Invisibility changed to 100% evasion for 2, 3, or 4 seconds. So this is a fundamental rework. I like that they did this. Basically, this is I would say it's an enormous buff. The most important thing to understand here is it's a completely different card. It is literally the opposite card of what it once was. And that's the most important thing to understand about this. Like, so when it's invisibility, what this wants you to do is it forces you to run a shit ton of elusive things. Because if you run some non-elusive things, you're going to have attack targets. Invisibility forces you to run all of your elusive things. Otherwise, if I'm running like 6 elusives and like 2 non-elusives, like I'm getting assassins off of like Queen of Pain or something, my Queen of Pain is going to get gangbanged. And as into that as I am, that's not what I want if I want to be winning boards, right? So invisibility at 100% is just a gigantic trap, right? It doesn't make any sense. I'm making my opponents not target my elusive things that I want them to target. It makes no goddamn sense. It makes literally opposite sense. Suddenly, the logic of this is completely reversed. Suddenly, I get 100% evasion on my elusives for 2, 3, 4 seconds. And this makes me think about it completely opposite. Instead of, let's put all these elusives on my board, suddenly it's, well, I only want like 1 elusive, right? I mean, you don't need anything else. This is like, I look at this in Assassins, I'm like, okay, holy shit. We put Treant Protector in front. My literal Treant Protector suddenly just tanks everything. 100% evasion on that one unit. I only need one Elusive now. Right? So keep this in mind. It's now something that you really never need more than like, if you get this in something like Hunters and something like Assassins, which are probably the two best comps in this, although keep in mind I said 600s isn't really a comp. If I get this, I'm kind of good, right? And I think it's really interesting to compare this to Pocket Sand. Is this better than Pocket Sand? Let's look. So Pocket Sand, effect duration change from 2 seconds to 1, 2, 3. So Pocket Sand is, let me just make sure I'm getting all the numbers right. A true Assassins player wouldn't have to double check. So it's one cell away blind, 50% mischance, and 50% less mana when attacked. 50% mischance. Just for like the first second of the fight. So Elusive targets for 2, 3, 4 seconds instead of 1, 2, 3 for one more second at all levels. You get 100% mischance instead of 50%. Is this just better than Pocket Sand? Now, obviously, with Pocket Sand, you are reducing enemy mana gain, and when you blink around, sometimes in the mid fight, like after you kill your first target, you do reapply it. But with Elusive targets, the fact that it's 100% instead of 50, and it lasts 1 second longer, which is pretty often literally twice the duration, 2 instead of 1. Isn't that just nuts? Because if my Treant is in front, literally every unit will attack my Treant. I'm pretty sure this is just better than Pocket Sand, right? Elusive targets is so good, dude. Look at this shit. Like, that's so crazy. Elusive targets got morphlinged. It went from like the worst thing ever to something that's like an actual thing now. I'm literally picking this over Pocket Sand in Assassins. Like, what the fuck? Dude, that's so crazy. Holy shit. I want to point out, like, evasion is really powerful when you can kind of get one unit to tank with it. The fact that it means your opponents don't get mana for attacks is really important. Your opponent's mana gain will get significantly lowered, because the first 2 seconds, they basically get disarmed. If they're attacking a 100% mischance target, they're not getting mana from that. Huge. However, what I will say about Elusive targets is I don't think you can just run this in anything, right? Like, it feels like it kind of needs to be in Assassins. You can run it in something like Hunters that have a lot of backline. You can run it in Mages. But it needs to be something that has a lot of backline, basically. Right? So, I think this is still build specific, but it's pretty powerful. There's gonna be like 2, maybe 3 builds this will fit into, and it will be pretty good when it works. Okay, Pocket Sand. We kind of talked about that, just now. Let's see if this got better or worse. 1, 2, 3 seconds. Honestly, I mean, I guess we should feel like it got better because it's a tier 3 and it went to 3, and Assassins are still good in like early and mid game. Assassins are supposed to kind of be shit early, but the fact that Morphling is an actual unit now, and Queen of Pain and Morphling have better like blink logics, make Assassins, like 3 Assassins are solid early. Pocket Sand looks solid. It looks like it's gotten a bit better, if anything. Shaman Pluck. Hex chance change from 17% to 7, 12, 17. This card is ass. This card will always be ass. Well, I say always. I mean, this until they change it and make it not ass, it's always going to be ass. That being said, I guess you could say that about everything if you're a smart ass. Okay. So the hex duration on Shaman Pluck is like 1500 milliseconds, which is not long enough. There's no reason for this, right? It just sucks. I'm sorry, Shaman Pluck. I want to talk about Shamans, actually. Since we're talking about Shaman Pluck, yo, Chris Clay, welcome to the 1/8 Gay Club. Since we're already talking about Shaman Pluck, let's talk about Shamans. I skipped this before because, honestly, I didn't really want to talk about this. But some of you guys pointed out, Enigma's a Shaman now. So it's like, wow, Shamans, guys, think about it, guys. Shamans make sense, guys. You know, Enigma, he's even a primordial Shaman. Look at that. Arc Warden and Enigma, they both have the same, both have the alliances. You get Shaman, and you're also in primordial, guys. Guys, Shamans is just bad. I really hate to be the bearer of bad news. The way Shamans is designed, it doesn't really make sense. Enigma is the worst hero now. I'll grant it's possible for like 4 primordial in the mid game to make sense. It might. It easily might. But like, you're not going to be able to reliably get Enigma. It's not going to often want to be your 4th primordial because it's more of a mid game thing and you won't get this in the late game. Midnight Pulse has gotten destroyed. Like, so look, when you look at Shaman as a concept, it just makes no sense. It's like, after your Disruptor ulti has gone off, they end with 0 mana. But like, that's terrible. Mana gain is like a mid-game concept, not a late-game concept. In the late game, you gain mana like instantly when you get hit. You don't really need mana gain over time. Once you've already gotten the Disruptor ulti down, you don't need to steal their mana. You've kind of already won the fight. It's like some weird win more thing that comes online at all the wrong times and includes 2 of the weakest units in the game. It's arguable. I don't know about after this patch. It's extremely arguable that Shadow Shaman and Arc Warden are literally the 2 worst heroes in the entire game. And both of them are 2 out of the 3 Shamans you need. It's like, I guess Arc Warden is a tiny bit better. Shamans, I'd be very surprised, guys, if Shamans were like a legitimate thing. I think it makes no sense. I don't know. Some people will try it. I probably won't. Okay, let's move past it. Okay, Font of Creation. Primordials now produce higher rank Eidolons based on tier of Font of Creation. Eidolons go from 240 to 300, 400, 500. Wow, they got buffed at every level. Yo, what the heck? They got like double buffed. Damage changed from 50 to 80 to, so it's in the middle here. So their health is 500. What the hell? Their health got buffed at every level. So there's this interesting fun fact that you guys might not know. If you know this fact, you're a nerd. And I know this fact because I'm a nerd. So, Eidolons have a ridiculous amount of armor and magic resist. It's actually crazy. Actually, I don't know what their magic resist is. They have armor. Eidolons have 20 armor, guys. They literally take about half of normal physical damage. Them getting more HP makes them really, really tanky. Like, the HP buff to this is normally wouldn't be that big. They have a stupid amount of armor. This is still ass. Don't pick this guy. Guys, it's Font of Creation. Don't pick this. It can't be good, right? There's no way this is good. I'll accept Primordials. 2 Primordials is good early. 4 Primordials could be decent in the mid game. Font of Creation is so bad. Guys, it's so bad. No way. Like, it can't be. There's literally no way, guys. This is so bad. It's shit. Why would you ever do this? Primordials are great for elite rounds, though. Sure, I agree with that. It can't be good. I refuse to accept that this could be good. Okay, we're moving past it. Alright, guys. This is the point in the patch notes review. We're 3 hours into this. We only have 7.5 hours to go. God, that's going to be a lot of stalling. If I can review the patch notes for the next 7.5 hours, I'll have beaten Purge. Okay. The 3-hour mark in this patch notes review marks the first bathroom break I'm going to have to take here. I will be back in 1 second.